In the heart of 14th century Florence, a city of bustling markets and towering cathedrals, one family began to spin a web of influence that would eventually ensnare all of Europe. They weren't kings or generals. They didn't command armies or hold official titles. They wielded something far more potent: money, and the genius to turn it into absolute power. This is the story of how the Medici family, starting as simple merchants, built a financial empire that bankrolled the Renaissance, controlled popes, and conquered a continent without ever firing a shot. Our story begins with Giovanni di Bicci de Medici. In a Florence rife with political rivalries and street violence, Giovanni was a master of staying in the shadows. While other powerful families flaunted their wealth and made enemies, he saw a different path to power. He realized Florence's destiny lay not in swords, but in finance, in the abstract world of credit, trust, and the art of moving fortunes without touching a single gold coin. Giovanni founded the Medici Bank not just as a business, but as a network built on loyalty and discretion. He kept a low profile, quietly building relationships and a reputation for reliability. By the early 1400s, his bank wasn't just another financial house. It was the beating heart of Florence's economy. But it was his son, Cosimo de Medici, who elevated the family from wealthy bankers to the secret rulers of the city. Cosimo was a quiet, patient strategist who understood that money's true value wasn't in buying luxury, but in purchasing influence. He began to pour Medici wealth into Florence itself, funding artists, architects, and thinkers. He didn't just give loans to princes and popes. He bought their loyalty, their gratitude, and their silence. Cosimo transformed Florence into his personal project. When he commissioned a dome for the cathedral or a statue for a public square, he wasn't just beautifying the city. He was stamping the Medici name with its very soul, making the family indispensable to its identity. He governed without ever holding office, manipulating the republic from behind the scenes. His power was so absolute that when his rivals finally managed to exile him, the city's economy ground to a halt. Florence couldn't function without him. Within a year, they were begging him to return. Under Cosimo, the Medici Bank became an international powerhouse. Branches sprang up across Europe, Rome, Venice, London, Geneva, Bruges. Each branch wasn't just a bank, it was an intelligence hub and a political listening post. The Medici had their finger on the pulse of every major European court. Kings borrowed from them to fund wars. Nobles came to them for dowries. Even the papacy, the most powerful institution in the Western world, ran on Medici credit. When a pope needed to build a grand basilica or finance a crusade, it was the Medici who provided the funds. Every loan given, every interest payment collected, tightened the invisible threads that bound the most powerful men in Europe to a family of bankers in Florence. They weren't just managing money, they were directing the flow of power across the entire continent. Then came Cosimo's grandson, Lorenzo, known to history as Il Magnifico, the Magnificent. If Cosimo turned power into an art, Lorenzo perfected it. He was more than a banker, he was a cultural phenomenon. Under his patronage, Florence exploded into the epicenter of the Renaissance. He personally sponsored artists who would define the age: Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Botticelli. He filled his court with poets and philosophers, turning Florence into a dazzling spectacle of art and intellect. To the world, he was a generous patron and a brilliant statesman. But every sculpture commissioned, every festival hosted, was a calculated political move. Lorenzo was seducing Florence, wrapping it in a blanket of cultural glory, so complete that Medici rule felt not like a burden, but a blessing. He was shaping the culture to entrench his family's power, making art his most effective weapon. But such dominance breeds jealousy. Rival banking families, like the Pazzi, saw the Medici as tyrants. In 1478, they hatched a plot, backed by the Pope himself, to assassinate Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano during High Mass in the Florence Cathedral. It was a brutal, shocking attack. Giuliano was stabbed to death at the altar, but Lorenzo, wounded, fought his way to safety. The people of Florence, far from joining the conspirators, were enraged. They saw the attack not just on a man, but on their city's pride and glory. They rose up, hunted down the plotters, and solidified Lorenzo's power more than ever. He had survived, and in doing so, became a living legend. Even when facing exile or rebellion, the Medici network held strong. Their power wasn't tied to a physical throne. It was embedded in the ledgers and credit lines stretching across Europe. Kings who owed them vast sums still needed them. Popes who despised them still relied on their financial machinery. The Medici had woven themselves so deeply into the fabric of European power that they were impossible to remove. Their influence reached its zenith when their wealth finally translated into the ultimate prize, the papacy itself. Not once, but 3 times, a Medici would sit on the papal throne as Pope Leo X, Pope Clement VII, and Pope Leo XI. The bankers from Florence now commanded the spiritual authority of all of Christendom. Like all great empires, the Medici Bank eventually declined. Mismanagement, risky loans to untrustworthy rulers, and shifting political tides weakened the financial machine that Giovanni had so carefully built. Branches began to fail, and the family's golden touch seemed to fade. But by then, it hardly mattered. The bank could crumble, but the Medici legacy was already immortal, forged in marble, paint, and stone. They had financed the rebirth of Western civilization. Modern banking, international finance, and the very idea of soft power of shaping the world through culture and economics were all pioneered in their Florentine offices. The Medici proved that the most enduring conquests aren't won with armies. They are won with vision, with ambition, and with the understanding that true power doesn't always belong to the king on the throne, but to the banker who funds it. They didn't just handle money. They transformed it into an empire. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories of the people who shaped our world.